Oh, hi there! This video is sponsored by Hunt a Killer. I don't know about you, but I am always so busy. So when I have time to spend with my friends, I want to make it special. Hunt a Killer gives me just that. A murder mystery subscription box that's the new, unique way to do game night, where we can have fun and work together, all while investigating a crime without ever having to leave the house. More than just solving a mystery, Hunt a Killer tells an immersive story through complex relationships and detailed backstories for each suspect that unfolds as you get closer to cracking the case. And this story is told through case files, audio recordings, and pieces of evidence delivered right to your door. Not only is it a unique experience, but part of the proceeds for every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping solve real-world cold cases. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/allthingslost and use the code ALLTHINGSLOST for 20% off your first box to see if you have what it takes to hunt a killer. There are a lot of ways media becomes lost. Legal issues, obscurity, a lack of preservation. But sometimes, someone doesn't want it to be found, and they make sure of it. Today, we're talking nuclear war, military confiscation, marital disputes, Nazis, and the music of Jeff Buckley, all of which suffered the same fate. And just for fun, I'm going to include a piece of found media that narrowly escaped destruction twice. This video is darker than my usual content, and I didn't even get to talk about the really disturbing stuff. So if you want me to do a part 2 where I cover the really messed up destroyed lost media, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at LostMediaMike. So here are 8 pieces of lost media that were intentionally destroyed. American History X. American History X is one of those movies that just sticks with you. The superb acting, the hard-hitting subject matter, and the super dark ending. But somehow, in a movie with Nazis and curb stomping, the most famous aspect just might be its post-production drama. First-time director Tony Kaye delivered the movie on time and on budget, which should have been the hard part, but producers at New Line Cinema demanded changes after test screenings, and Kaye wasn't having any of it. Eventually, creative control of the editing process was usurped by lead actor Edward Norton, who is known in the industry for being very demanding and controlling of his movies. In what might be the pettiest feud in Hollywood history, communication between Kaye and the producers broke down, and Kaye would only communicate through full-page ads that he bought with his own money in various Hollywood trade publications. And the ads were full of ambiguous quotes by people like Abraham Lincoln and John Lennon, targeted towards the studio and Norton. When New Line Cinema tried to renegotiate with Kaye, he showed up with a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Tibetan monk. When the studio gave him 8 weeks to recut the film, he demanded a full year and fled to the Caribbean, where he had the script rewritten by Nobel Prize winning poet Derek Walcott. During this whole process, Kaye tried to get his name removed from the film and have it replaced with Humpty Dumpty. He sued for $200 million when they wouldn't allow it. The drama surrounding the film essentially ruined Kaye's career, and he's only made a handful of movies since. And in the end, the movie was 119 minutes long versus Kaye's 96-minute cut, which reportedly was the result of Edward Norton editing the movie to give himself more screen time, to which Kaye said ruined the movie. This final edit not only extended and added scenes, but also removed a number of scenes that have never been seen by the public, and the exact nature of these shots is unknown. And the industry rumor is that Edward Norton destroyed the masters of the unused film, so they couldn't be added in later. But since there's no official statement that the tapes were destroyed, there's still hope that the footage might have been copied or does still exist. In more recent years, a number of deleted scenes have appeared on DVD releases, and a work print of Kaye's second cut of the movie was leaked online and can still be found on torrent trackers like My Spleen. Kaye is currently working on a follow-up called African History Y. There's currently no release date for it, and it doesn't appear to have begun filming. Dr. Strangelove. There's probably no other director with as many lost, deleted scenes as Stanley Kubrick. But unlike other lost scenes by other directors, these are not lost by mistake. Kubrick is infamous for demanding total control over his movies, so much so that he would withhold scenes and personally oversee their destruction, with accounts of his assistants burning and throwing away his scrapped work. With the exception of a few of his movies like Spartacus, where he was more or less a director for hire, Kubrick does not release deleted scenes. It arguably wasn't until his 1964 film, Dr. Strangelove, that Kubrick would have total creative control over a project. A satirization of the Cold War, the movie follows US forces trying to stop a rogue general from executing a nuclear strike on the USSR that the US later find out will trigger a Soviet doomsday device, ending the world. It's a comedy, and I promise it's way funnier than it sounds. In the theatrical release, the movie ends with the Soviet ambassador taking pictures of the war room with a spy cam, while the titular character, the wheelchair-bound Dr. Strangelove, says he has a plan on how to save themselves. He begins to walk before the movie abruptly cuts to a montage of bombs dropping. But Kubrick didn't always want the movie to end so suddenly. He had originally envisioned a much sillier ending, an 11-minute pie fight in the United States war room. The scene would have started with Dr. Strangelove standing up from his wheelchair before falling down, while the Russian ambassador who was taking the pictures is caught, culminating in a comically large pie fight. And when Dr. Strangelove finally gets everyone to stop, they find the president and the Russian ambassador building sandcastles in the custard. Since the leaders have lost their mind, Dr. Strangelove is announced as the new leader. It's commonly believed that the scene was cut because of the assassination of JFK, because of a clip where the president is pied in the face and someone yells, "Our president has been struck down in his prime," and they thought this might have been in bad taste. But Kubrick has since denied this, saying the scene was cut before the assassination, and he removed it for two reasons. One, it didn't match the tone of the rest of the film, but I personally think this juxtaposition would have been hilarious. And that the actors were smiling when the pie fight was meant to be a metaphor for war, and Kubrick wanted it to be played straight. According to the movie's editor, Anthony Harvey, the scene was just misplaced. So just like in the case of Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, where lost footage thought to have been destroyed was found, maybe there's a chance for Dr. Strangelove 2. Parasol Stars. In 1992, Ocean Software launched the third game in the Bubble Bobble series, Parasol Star, for the PC Engine, and the game was ported to numerous other home consoles, like the Amiga, the Atari ST, the NES, and the Game Boy. But one version of the game that never saw release, though advertised, was a port for the Commodore 64. The game was being worked on by veteran programmer Colin Porch, who had previously worked on Contra and Dragon's Lair. Ocean Software would officially comment on its absence, saying the game was stolen from Colin's home office. But as it turns out, this was just a corporate cover-up, and the truth didn't come out until 2005 when Colin set the story straight. In his own words, "My wife and I had not been getting on very well, usually rowing about her drinking habits, and she decides to go back to her first husband of 20 years earlier. Before leaving, she broke or corrupted all the discs she could find, including all the Parasol Stars developments and backups. She expressed extreme remorse afterwards. She was two different people depending on whether she had been drinking, but the damage was done. I only had a disc previously shown to Ocean, about 3 months old, which had remained in my briefcase since showing them. They unfortunately could not spare the time for me to repeat the work." Colin and his wife are obviously no longer together, and in recent years, preservationists have been able to get in contact with Colin, who says he doesn't have the surviving demo. Along with the work that was destroyed, composer Keith Tenman scored original music for the port that's never been heard, and Keith no longer has the music discs. In 2019, programmer Simon Jameson began work on the port so we could finally get a port of Parasol Stars for the Commodore 64. He posted a few videos, but at this time, I don't think the game is finished, and I haven't heard of any updates in a while.
Davy Jones, King Neptune, and his court came aboard as the task force crossed the equator.
Operation Argus. In 1958, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, working under the United States military, conducted a series of nuclear tests near Antarctica. The tests were meant to study the Christophilus effect, also known as the Argus effect after the study. The theory, first proposed by physicist Nicholas Christophilus, was that nuclear weapons could be used in a defensive manner, that a nuclear bomb could create an electrical magnetic current so powerful that it could render nearby enemy bombs unusable. If the theory was true, that ever-present fear of nuclear attack during the Cold War could have been eased. With this in mind, and a ban on nuclear testing on the horizon, Operation Argus was rushed into development with just a few months of preparation, when most nuclear tests are planned over the course of years. To conduct these high-altitude Antarctic tests, on April 28, 1958, Task Force 88 was formed to execute and record the results, including filming of the detonations. Their findings weren't declassified until 1982, showing that the theory was both true and false. An electrical current was produced powerful enough to disrupt satellites and radar, but not strong enough to disrupt warheads. Through these declassified documents, it was found that following the somewhat disappointing results, the US government destroyed most records of the experiment, including key footage of Operation Argus. This is not only a piece of lost history, but the destruction of these materials have greatly affected the members of Task Force 88, a large number of whom developed leukemia, but because of the lack of evidence around the radiation levels they were exposed to, making a claim through Veteran Affairs has become near impossible for them. In 1997, the US Department of Energy released a video about the experiments that can be easily found online, but all footage of the nuclear detonations are excluded. And because the experiments involved nuclear bombs, the US military, the Antarctic, and lost media, Operation Argus is ripe with conspiracy theories. YouTuber Nick Crowley has a fantastic video where I first heard about the experiments that delves into these conspiracy theories. I'll put the link in the description. Wake in Fright. The 1971 movie Wake in Fright is one of those pieces of lost media that I'm glad was found, but man is it rough to watch. Filmed on location in Australia, the movie is about depravity in the Australian outback, and while it was nominated for the Grand Prix at the Cannes Film Festival, one of only a handful of Australian films to be recognized by the festival, the movie was a commercial failure. It underperformed at the box office, partially due to a rather crude, stereotypical depiction of the outback, and a really messed up scene of kangaroos being shot. The hunters they hired for the scenes were professionals, but during the multiple hours of filming, the hunters got drunk, affecting their aim, resulting in kangaroos being maimed in such a grotesque manner that members of the crew fainted, and other members cut the power so the filming would stop. Likely because of these scenes, the movie had no marketing in the United States. This, combined with the film's distributor losing the master tapes, Wake in Fright became a rarity. The movie was infrequently shown on TV through a censored version, and VHS copies that were also censored were exceedingly rare. Noticing this rarity, and the lack of an uncensored version, starting in 1996, the film's editor, Anthony Buckley, set out on a quest to recover the film, fearing the uncensored version might be lost forever. In '98, following up on a rumor, he traveled to London in search of the movie, but upon arrival, he discovered that the footage was just the week prior shipped to the United States. And it wasn't until 2002 when Buckley was finally able to track down the footage, finding it in a warehouse marked for immediate destruction. Had Buckley arrived a week later, the movie might have been lost forever. He found that this footage was still missing some scenes, but through some more searching, he discovered the complete film by sifting through the trash bins of the Iron Mountain vaults in Boston, Massachusetts. With two versions of the movie, some 263 cans of film, it was painstakingly restored in 2009 after years of work. And the re-release officially premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. And the movie was just as controversial as ever, with festival goers walking out during the kangaroo scene. And in this list full of lost media that was carelessly discarded, we have one that just narrowly escaped the same fate. The Cavalesi cable car disaster. On February 3rd, 1998, during a training exercise, a US aircraft was flying near a ski resort in Cavalesi, Italy. The plane was flying too low and flew through a ski lift cable, causing the cable car to fall 260 feet. All 20 people on board were killed, but the plane landed safely. Two of the 4 Marines on the plane stood trial: the navigator, Captain Joseph Schweitzer, and the pilot, Captain Richard J. Ashby, accused of negligent homicide and involuntary manslaughter. According to regulations at the time, the two were limited to flying no lower than 2,000 feet, but the cable car was between 260 and 330 feet. They were also traveling at 540 miles per hour, well over the legal limit and near the plane's top speed. During the trial, the navigator claimed that the equipment was malfunctioning, so he couldn't know their altitude, and was unaware of the altitude and speed restrictions. And though the two had been previously written up for flying too low in another incident, it was determined that the maps they used didn't show the cables, and they were acquitted of all charges. But as it turns out, this wasn't the whole story, and the whole thing was caught on tape. During the exercise, the crew filmed the flight, but upon landing, they watched the footage. Both Ashby and Schweitzer destroyed the evidence that likely would have incriminated them. Upon learning about the tape, the two once again stood trial where they were convicted of obstruction of justice and conduct unbecoming of an officer and gentleman for their part in the destruction of the evidence. Both were removed from service, and one of them received minimal jail time. But because of their destruction of evidence, the two can never really be held accountable, and the families of the 20 lost on February 3rd, 1998 will never see justice.
It's just music. Yeah, just typical white boy guitar rock, basically.
My Sweetheart the Drunk. Jeff Buckley is one of those artists whose music is just timeless, and one of far too many that leave us before their time, having only one album released in his lifetime, the classic record, Grace. Before his passing in 1997, Buckley was working on his second studio album that was ultimately left unfinished, released posthumously in '98 as Sketches from My Sweetheart the Drunk. The album features demos of what was recorded at the time, but the project was recorded in 2 blocks, one in 96 and another in 97. The 2009 documentary, Amazing Grace, Jeff Buckley, details how Buckley was unsatisfied with the 1996 recording sessions and threw out an entire album's worth of material. And normally this wouldn't be a big deal. He thought he'd have time to re-record and rework the songs to his liking, but this wasn't the case. And those thrown out recordings were some of the very limited studio work he would ever produce. But just like the case of so many other entries on this list, more music from the unfinished album has been leaked online, like the lyricless song Peace Offering and an alternate version of the song You and I, giving fans hope that there's more of the late Jeff Buckley's music that we're yet to hear. The Joey Bishop Show, Episode 85. The 1960s sitcom The Joey Bishop Show was a star vehicle for comedian Joey Bishop, who played an employee at a Hollywood public relations firm. The show would be little more than an unremarkable footnote of TV history if it wasn't for its single missing episode. The season 3 episode, only known as number 85, guest starred Von Meter, a comedian best known for his impression of then President JFK. Meter was a massive star at the time, with his 1962 parody of the Kennedy family, The First Family, being the best-selling pre-Beatles record, and even won Album of the Year at the Grammys, one of only 2 comedy albums to ever win the award. Episode 85 was filmed on November 15th, 1963, just days before the assassination of JFK. Seeing the impression of the assassinated president so soon after the tragedy, the episode was pulled along with all of Meter's albums. And because he had built his career around impersonating the president, and doing so was no longer in good taste, his career quickly faded. The episode never aired, and all tapes of number 85 were destroyed by NBC. They were so thorough, not even a single photo of the episode survived. No official synopsis of the episode exists, but the commonly spread rumor is that the episode would have had Meter performing his JFK routine, and Joey Bishop actually thinks Meter is the real JFK. The Lost Movies of George Méliès. French director Georges Méliès was a monumentally important pioneer of special effects in early cinema, creating amazing technical feats that surprisingly hold up pretty decently over 100 years later. Not only was Méliès a genius, he was wildly prolific, making over 500 films between 1896 and 1912, including some of the very first narrative movies, like The Kingdom of the Fairies, The Impossible Voyage, and the iconic A Trip to the Moon, considered the first sci-fi film. But by the first quarter of the 20th century, Méliès was largely forgotten in his time, spending the rest of his days working at candy and toy shops, pulling 14-hour days with no time off just to survive. He would receive mild recognition late in his life, but his influence is still seen today. Director Terry Gilliam of Monty Python fame was greatly inspired by Méliès, and his influence can be seen in music videos by Queen and the Smashing Pumpkins, and the filmmaker was played by Ben Kingsley in Martin Scorsese's movie Hugo. Of his 500 films, only 231 have been recovered, and of the recovered footage, only some of the hand-colorized film has been preserved. There are a few reasons for this massive loss of film, and all of them are pretty tragic. Méliès had to burn down his film to sell the silver content from the reels to pay off his debt, and after becoming disillusioned with the film industry, he burned a large amount of his film out of sheer frustration. What he didn't get rid of was confiscated by the French military during World War I, who made boot heels out of the film reel. Most of the footage that did survive deteriorated, rendering it unsalvageable. The loss of Méliès' work is not only a tragedy for lost media and preservationists, but for the history of cinema as a whole. He was able to make a lasting impression on film with less than half of his output being found. We're left to only wonder what treasures were sold, stolen, or left to rot, and how they could have changed cinema. Despite everything that the works of George Méliès went through, new footage is occasionally discovered, and just like nearly every piece of lost media on this list, I really hope I'm wrong, and someday we'll find these destroyed pieces of lost media. Thank you so much for watching. Do you know of any other pieces of lost media that were intentionally destroyed? If you do, let me know in the comments, or you can find me on Twitter at LostMediaMike. You can also let me know what else you want to see in future videos, and if you want me to make a part 2. This is Mike with All Things Lost. See you soon.